Some of the best contemporary television centers around the monetarily endowed. Whether they skewer these characters like well-dressed kebabs.
We're here because we're going to visit the town my grandmother's from. Oh. It's a little town, Testa dell'Acqua.
Yeah, that sounds very special.
Or pit them against each other in gilded cage dogfights.
Hey, Dad. It was Roman. Roman talked to Pierce. He took a call from Naomi Pierce.
Dad.
Roman.
Or show them at their most harebrained.
When I think about all that money I lost just to see you in this place, all I can say is worth it.
And lately, depictions of the ultra-rich seem to be this era's preferred form of satire.
I also think that people at the dinner table shouldn't be talking about Hollywood agendas. that's my personal thing as well.
While wealthy villain has been a delightful trope since the Muppet Christmas Carol, these shows feel different. And that's because in these shows, everyone is rich and they're also pretty villainous. And by not singling out just one bad character, it seems like these shows are attempting a much broader critique of how wealth functions across the board. But do these shows actually show the super rich in an unsympathetic light? Do they make us think these characters don't deserve all that money? Are they criticizing wealth, or are they doing something else entirely? Let's find out in this Wisecrack edition about why we love watching rich people on TV. And spoilers ahead for lots of wealthy people squabbling on various streaming platforms. But before we get into it, I wanted to take a second and tell you about our stream. It's called Wisecrack Live. It happens every Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific. It's hosted by me. And I'd love it if you would join us. We dive deep into everything going on in internet culture. We watch stuff, we talk about stuff, and we have a hell of a time in the chat. So join us Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific on Wisecrack Live. And if you want to check out old episodes first, you just click the live tab on our page and you can watch them there. And even though the chat won't be live, you can act like it is maybe. That could be fun too. But now, back to the show. Now, at first glance, the answer to some of these questions seems pretty easy. Of course, the characters on shows like Succession or White Lotus are portrayed unsympathetically. The Roy siblings are shiftless, selfish, and useless, and that's when they're not being actively destructive. Their father, Logan, might have clawed his way up from nothing, but he's a bully who spent his life being evil. These characters can have anything they want, but spend their time squabbling over morsels of power. For the Roy siblings, that's because they think acquiring power is the only way they'll ever get a kiss from daddy.
All the rich white folk are going to argue, and then whoever's best is going to win that kiss from daddy.
Similarly, the White Lotus focuses intently on the very wealthy and very intolerable.
Are you Ms. McQuoid?
Quad. One syllable.
McQuad.
Well, two syllables, but the second part is one syllable.
With brief cameos for the newly wealthy and intolerable.
May I ask, did you sign a prenup? Yes. But it's, generous, but if your marriage ends, you're not set for life.
Sometimes they're raging at hotel staff.
Did you not see me in the restaurant just now? I'm sorry? I'm waving to you, I'm shouting to you, I know you saw me.
Sometimes they're using their fancy college educations as weapons.
Where'd you go to school?
Sometimes they're using money to buy the affections of those who don't have it.
Happiness.
Actually, often they seem to be using their money that way.
Do you have my money?
Money?
It's 2,000 for overnights.
Sorry, for what?
For me.
Even with all they have, they still find reasons to be envious of each other.
She thinks that, everybody wants to be her, everybody wants her life.
Yeah.
And moreover, this is all played for laughs.
And I decided to go bumming around the American West in the hopes of out-scandalizing my father.
The rich are so bad that they are rendered ridiculous, like malicious children, unable to moderate their emotions and desires. And this causes them to constantly make poor decisions.
You met two hookers at the bar and brought them back to our room, and Cameron had sex with them on the couch?
In fact, making bad choices seems to be a rite of passage for the newly wealthy, like when Ethan and Harper appropriate Cam and Daphne's, let's call it unique approach to marriage, all to better fit their new glamorous lifestyle. What's more, these wealthy characters constantly use those around them as means to satisfy their own ends. Tanya only wants to help Belinda because she wants to feel like a good person and needs someone to be emotionally beholden to her. Albie only helps Lucia because he wants to prove that unlike his father, he's one of the good guys. Tom only engages with cousin Greg because he's the one relative of the Roys who Tom can feel superior to and successfully manipulate. And Roman's weird sex thing with Jerry is inextricable from his desire to use her carefully earned power to acquire his own. But the character's own ends, which they pursue so ruthlessly, are usually bad or stupid, and then they accidentally screw everything up with a single dick pic.
Don't want pictures of my dick?
No.
Okay.
And the rich in these shows are not only portrayed as being stupidly immoral, they're also at the center of the drama. A drama that, in Succession at least, is of global importance. Even when the characters in Succession are behaving ridiculously, they do so in a world that turns its eyes to them. As a result, Kendall denouncing his father at the end of season 2 has an almost genuine nobility to it. And Jeremy Strong has revealed that he plays Kendall like he's playing Hamlet rather than for laughs, which is partly why such an unsympathetic character might become someone you accidentally root for. So how do we make sense of shows in which all the rich characters are shitty people? Well, let's look to Aristotle, who in Poetics distinguished between two sorts of drama, tragedy and comedy. Now, tragedy focuses on noble characters who are usually portrayed as being either more important or better than your average man. That might mean a wealthier, more successful. Examples from Shakespeare, who adopted these conventions, may feel familiar. Characters like Othello, Hamlet, and King Lear start out very distinguished, a great general, a prince, or a king. But over the course of the play, these characters become the victims of fate, as the very qualities which make them noble end up leading to their downfall. For example, Hamlet is educated, intelligent, reflective, but this leads to him being too indecisive to take action against his uncle and secure the crown. We also see a more contemporary but classic tragic figure in the form of our friend Anakin Skywalker, who hates sand.
It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Tragedies get the audience to sympathize with their central characters and to fear their fates in a way that induces catharsis, emotional release. Comedy, by contrast, depicts people who are less virtuous. These stories deal with human weakness and foibles. Comedy portrays people who are, in a way, worse than us, characters we look down on for their lack of admirable qualities. Or just like watching Mac from It's Always Sunny attempt to do a jackass, such stories induce laughter. But despite earning plenty of our mockery, comedic characters end up a lot happier than if they were in a tragedy. Because again, the gang at Patty's seems like they are happier than Darth Vader. In Shakespeare, tragic characters kill and get killed, while comedic characters flirt and get married. In a somewhat similar vein, contemporary sitcoms, especially pre-streaming, all ended each episode basically back where they started. Now, you know how this goes. Ridiculous characters experience mostly harmless conflicts.
I mean, I can't give people orders.
No one's gonna listen to you.
I am not qualified to run the catalog.
You're not qualified to work at the catalog.
Only to wind up in the same comfortably hilarious circumstances. And we come to love them for it, whether they're Homer Simpson, Kramer, or Dennis Reynolds. But here we come to a crinkle in Aristotle's definition. See, if the characters on the White Lotus and Succession were good or moral, both would be dramas. But if their actions didn't have the potential to cause serious consequences, both would be comedies. Of course, Aristotle lived before the wonders of Netflix and HBO Max, so he probably had no idea that his two categories of drama, comedy and tragedy, were gonna blend into one big smoothie of content. Because today, shows like Succession and The White Lotus mix elements of tragedy and comedy. The wealthy characters are clearly portrayed in unsympathetic ways, unless you too run a multinational corporation with all the empathy of a boa constrictor. These people are explicitly worse than you. At the same time, their deeply dramatic worlds still turn on their actions and choices. Tom flubs in Congress, and it's funny, but he might go to jail, and we are, despite ourselves, relieved when he doesn't. Tanya is taken to see a performance of the tragic opera Madame Butterfly because she is a tragic character, played with all the guile and cunning of one of the Three Stooges. The characters on The White Lotus flounder around in mundanities, unaware that their silly actions will eventually culminate in murder. And then those murders pretty much leave most of them in the exact same position they started in. That is to say, these shows at every turn induce both laughter and catharsis. We get catharsis from watching these rich kooks face the music, and we get a solid dose of comedy in the process.
Like, just because I like a joke doesn't mean I'm a f***ing clown.
So what's the gross total effect of mixing drama and comedy, besides potentially giving you fuel to, well, actually, your poor ancient philosophy professor? And does it aid or hamper both shows' attempts to critique the filthy rich? Well, we would argue that this approach means that the shows let the audience have their cake and eat it too. What I mean is, we get to watch these rich people do things, which are very important in the case of Succession, or potentially very consequential in the case of the White Lotus murders, but we also get to feel that we are better than them. We know that the world turns on their actions. That's just how it is. But part of why this is because these people are so bad. The Roy siblings, for instance, have clearly been made bad by their ultra-privileged upbringing. Whereas the tragedies Aristotle describes portray powerful people as having, for the most part, assumed their noble status because they are more virtuous than everyone else, shows like Succession and White Lotus tell us that people become and remain rich and short because they are villains. Notably, in season 1, the working class characters who behave mostly moral, other than some brief impolite defecation, and some on-the-job drug-fueled banging, they end up getting totally screwed. In contrast, in season 2, the working class characters, specifically Lucia and Mia, engage in some truly competent manipulation and are rewarded with the happiest ending possible. And we don't even judge them because they're expropriating wealth from rich assholes to do it. But this, in a weird way, ends up arguably being an apology for the rich and powerful, and a comfort to those on the losing end of the Roy's power plays. Maybe you too could be rich, but you'd have to be a complete piece of shit. There's a quiet virtue in knowing that even if you might never be wealthy, at least you're a good person who is broke or barely getting by, but good nonetheless. I tell myself this all the time, it's like I could be working someplace else, probably making a lot more money, making stuff that might even be easier to make, but I'd feel bad about it, whereas I don't feel that bad about this. It feels pretty good. But if you have career advice for me for where I could go to be less ethical and make more money, please drop it in the comments. Seriously. Now, Friedrich Nietzsche believed that a similar tendency is inherent to Judeo-Christian religions and their subsequent effect on European culture. Now, he argued that ever since the Jewish people were slaves in Egypt, Judeo-Christianity has valorized suffering as a way to make people feel better about their shitty conditions. He writes, cheekily commenting on this tendency, only those who suffer are good. Only the poor, the powerless, the lowly are good. The suffering, the deprived, the sick, the ugly are the only pious people, the only ones saved. Salvation is for them alone. Whereas you rich, the noble and powerful, you are eternally wicked, cruel, lustful, insatiate, godless. You will also be eternally wretched, cursed, and damned. Now, for Nietzsche, this religious logic, which he called slave morality, helped people feel like their suffering was virtuous, while those in power, operating with master morality, got to do whatever the they wanted. Because why would you overthrow the powerful when your powerlessness is precisely what makes you good? And maybe in our more secular times, television about the wealthy serves, if unintentionally, a similar function to those religious stories which valorize the poor and condemn the wealthy. In this way then, even though these shows portray the rich unsympathetically, they also, quietly, justify the ongoing status of their real-life counterparts. These characters might remind us, for instance, of Bezos or Musk or the Murdochs, people who have so much more than us. But hey, at least we are ethically better than them. The world sucks and is deeply unfair, and that's just how it is. In this way, the surface level criticism of wealth these shows are steeped in starts to look a little suspect. And to be clear, we say this as major fans of these shows. If wealthy people always win, what incentive do we have to overhaul the very systems that they're able to game to get power? If good people are supposed to be poor, does that mean we just accept our own lots in life? Even though these shows critique the status quo, they maybe in some ways reinforce it by ameliorating the urge to fight against such inequality in the first place. But what do you guys think? Are shows like Succession and White Lotus actually subversive in their depictions of the corrupting power of wealth, or is their critique shadowed by their tacit acceptance of the system as it is? Let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much, as always, to our patrons for helping us stay filthy rich, and by that I mean kind of in business. We really appreciate it. And if you want to join that elite crew of moneymakers, movers, and shakers, the link is in the description. Please let us know what you think of this video. Like it, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. And most importantly, thank you so much for your time and attention. We'll see you later.